Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending upon where you're calling in from. My name is Sean Darrington. We've got some exciting things to share with you today. So StorageCraft recently made some significant announcements. We've been working diligently to integrate a variety of things and initiatives that we've had for really changing and giving everybody new opportunities to solve the data protection, but also the storage management challenges. So the headaches that you have about coming in on weekends and having issues with not being able to handle the growth of your organization and respond to business needs. Those are some of the things that we're going to share today and share with you today about what we've been doing to really solve some of these significant challenges that we hear from a lot of you on a regular basis in terms of the ability to manage not only the data growth, but then the perpetual problem of forklift upgrades, where I've got to choose a small, medium, or large version of a scale-up architecture, and at some point I'm going to have a mode of I need to actually rip and replace, and that's never a fun task to undertake in terms of planning, or to lose a weekend or two to do that. But also, downtime continues to be a significant issue, and that's never changed in the history of IT. However, the more critical and the more visible applications are, the more it oftentimes can cost the organization money or sometimes people's jobs, depending upon how successful or unsuccessful that is. And sometimes even at the executive level funding, sometimes that's actually an afterthought in terms of let's invest in disaster recovery and a real business continuity plan until, unfortunately, it happens, and then you get the budget, and then it's trying to fix it. So we're going to talk a little about what StorageCraft is doing to address these issues, because what many of you know over the past is that OneBlocks was our scale-out storage architecture. StorageCraft acquired Exablocks a year and a half ago, and we've been able to continue to evolve that into more and more capabilities to now what we announced last month just prior to VMworld, OneXafe being the Converged scale-out storage solution. This is built upon OneBlocks, and I'll get into a little bit about our architecture and what's different there. But this is more than just scale-out storage, and that now it's a converged data protection solution that also provides the opportunity to use scale-out storage for primary workloads. And for those of you that are also familiar with ShadowProtect, this is actually something that we've introduced in terms of ShadowXafe. So this is taking the same SLA-driven data protection policies and capabilities that you have with OneXafe and a converged solution. And ShadowXafe is a software-only solution. This enables organizations to deploy this in smaller environments where you may have a few dozen VMs and can use with third-party storage or even just internal storage of the servers. So it's a flexible software-only version for the data protection capabilities. It does not include the scale-out storage capabilities of OneXafe. But we've also combined this with our cloud services capabilities to give everyone the opportunity to look at really a purpose-built DR as a service opportunity for recovering applications, either physical or virtual, in StorageCraft's cloud. And this is a fully orchestrated workflow of not only recovering the data, but also the networking and the applications to be able to recover those applications and run them in StorageCraft's cloud with network connectivity back to your data center in the event of a disaster. And whether that be temporary or whether that be on a couple-week basis, depending upon the severity of the interruption to your business, that's something that both with OneXafe and ShadowXafe, you can replicate those backups into StorageCraft's cloud to do that. So it's great. I already see questions coming in the chat window. Keep them coming, and I will continue to monitor those and answer them kind of as we go through. The first question here is around, is there a maintenance fee when you purchase OneXafe? So yeah, we've made it extremely simple to purchase both OneXafe, the converged solution, as well as ShadowXafe. So OneXafe, there's an opportunity for purchasing the hardware, and I'll get into the different models between hard drive and all flash. And there's subscription services for managing remote replication, encryption at rest, and data protection. There is also an option for a perpetual license associated with OneXafe, but most of the customers are looking at a subscription option, but that is something that you do have the opportunity to look at two different buying methods for OneXafe. So just to kind of set the stage for those that aren't as familiar with Storagecraft and the one block scaled architecture that is now OneSafe, is that we are not actually built upon a block store, a traditional RAID, LUN, or volume-based solution, whether that be block or file, traditional SAN or NAS solution. So one of the things to think about as we talk about some of the opportunities and where we're coming from for delivering a solution, is that it's not what a lot of people are used to. It is not I'm going to create a 2 terabyte LUN and I'm going to create 8 of them, and that's going to give me 16 terabytes, and I allocate that to a server or multiple servers, and I've got to do all this individual capacity planning. That all goes out the window, because what's inside a OneSafe cluster is Storagecraft's intellectual property. If you see on the right-hand side, this is our distributed object store. So we've written our own content addressable object store. For those that are familiar with object storage, it's exactly what Amazon S3 and Google use. However, we don't require RESTful APIs to access the object store. What we have done is, underneath the covers, you have all the benefits of object storage in terms of being able to protect against bit rot and Uber, and being able to dynamically grow a cluster and think of a pool of storage that can be used by different file systems and or data protection services. On the top half, as you see on the diagram, we present NFS and SMB to applications as well as data protection services as part of the Converged OneSafe solution for physical or virtual machines. And those are presented as microservices, and everything that the applications are writing, so whether you're using it for file serving, whether you're using it for a primary NFS data store, all those files that are written into the cluster are decomposed into segments where we do inline deduplication and compression, and ultimately they're converted into a hash value or an object, and that object is immutable. And that provides a lot of flexibility for making sure that the original information you write is what the application reads back at a later point in time, but also in the event of ransomware infection, ransomware cannot delete or modify any of the objects in your cluster, right? They will write out encrypted files, but we'll have both copies, the encrypted file and the original files for you to have access to recover from. So that object store is very flexible because it enables you to think about provisioning storage as a pool, as an asset that as used and can be allocated to multiple applications. And so when you're looking at this, it's really a next generation storage solution that allows you to think about solving your problems differently because of the software capabilities that I mentioned in terms of inline deduplication and compression, but we're also taking snapshots of all those file system changes every 90 seconds and allows you to coordinate with the disaster recovery solution, whether that be remotely replicating to another OneSafe cluster and or replicating into our cloud for full business continuity. But from an economics perspective, we've taken a different approach, and many of you that are familiar with Exablocks and what OneBlocks has been doing over the years is you can actually bring your own hard drives, but you can also bring your own flash. And that changes the economics significantly, where now you're looking at, well, I'm going to hold off on the pricing for just a minute. I'll get to that in the next slide. But when you are able to bring your own drives, you can use different size drives depending upon what's the appropriate price point, and you can start with exactly what you need to. And as you look at protecting that information, either from a single drive failure or 2 drive failures in a node or in a multi-node cluster, you can simply grow and scale over time and never have to reconfigure your applications. We, in the background, move all the objects dynamically around the appropriate resource, drives or nodes in the cluster, to protect against those different fault domains. And that's something that makes it very easy for those that have a few terabyte problem, 10, 20 terabyte problem, but also those that have a petabyte problem. You can scale and grow non-disruptively from 10 terabytes to over a petabyte without reconfiguring the applications. And we have a portfolio of converged solutions that can be used as a converged data protection or just storage or just data protection, depending upon your problems that you're trying to solve. And you can see the 4400 series is an HDD-based model, and the one in the middle, the 4417, you actually have up to 200 terabytes in a single 2U form factor. And these prices that I was mentioning in terms of even bringing your own drives, you could have on-premises solution for less than the cost of Amazon S3 storage. So when you're purchasing a OneXafe, you can purchase that storage, and there are subscription and maintenance fees associated with that. We don't just sell the hardware as a hardware-only solution, but there is an opportunity for you to look at having a solution that's less than the cost of S3 storage. So instead of renting storage for perhaps a replication target or a DR target, you can use OneXafe in 2 different locations and save the money and have a better recovery experience. Similarly, the 5410 or 5210, this is an all-flash solution, and now you're looking at changing the economics about where you can actually use flash to solve different problems. Where you're looking at about $55,000, $50,000 list price for about 38 terabytes of all flash. That does change the economics about where you can look to use flash. Now, it's certainly not as inexpensive as hard drive-based storage, but when you're looking at what you can do from a recovery perspective, that's an opportunity to look to solving a different business need. So there are a couple of things that OneXafe has been doing, and for the most part, I'll be talking about OneXafe and the data protection capabilities, but keep in mind, for those that have different requirements, remote offices or branch offices with a handful of VMs or a handful of sockets, ShadowXafe is the software-only solution for just the data protection services. So keep that in mind as you look at this, because there are a number of things that OneXafe can do in terms of the SLA-driven data protection policies, but also primary storage for both virtual servers and unstructured data. And all of this is built upon our scale-out architecture. So regardless of hard drive-based or all-flash-based solution, the software is exactly the same. The software runs on both and all models in the same fashion. It's just a question about how active and how high-performing that solution is going to be. So from an SLA and a data protection policy perspective, this is something that StorageCraft has been doing for years, right, with Shadow Protect. And we've had a fantastic solution that has an agent-based protection model for physical and virtual servers, broad coverage of Linux and Windows servers. But what we've done now with OneXafe and ShadowXafe is we've introduced the opportunity to add an agentless way to protect applications running in a virtual environment. Now you can have the complete physical and virtual server protection all managed through a simple SLA-based model. And I'll give you a couple of examples here in terms of what that looks like shortly. The difference is also, for those that are familiar with Shadow Protect, we've had a capability. It's actually a patented capability for called Virtual Boot, which resumes backup images of your virtual machine in literally seconds. And I'll get into a little bit more about what that is. But this is something that really affords the opportunity for you to resume your business locally as quickly as possible. But because we can actually recover applications, both physical and virtual, and the Virtual Boot capability, you can recover applications to dissimilar hardware. And similarly, if you're using our cloud for disaster recovery as a service, you can recover physical servers in a virtual environment and vice versa in our cloud. And that all comes through the work that we've been doing to deliver OneXafe as really a converged solution. So on the left-hand side, this is an opportunity, and there are lots of different deployment models that you can look to, but this is an opportunity to look at OneXafe on the left-hand side as primary storage, and that's actually something that can be used for unstructured data, file serving, archiving, video imaging, log storage, a variety of different unstructured requirements, but also, for example, with the all-flash solution, that can be a primary NFS data store, right, for VMware, where now that same OneXafe cluster can be used for multiple purposes. Now, if you look in the middle of the slide here, this is where you have the opportunity to use the same storage, managed the same way, as a converged secondary storage solution. And this is having the data protection policies that are protecting all the applications running in the virtual environment and or physical, and it's in the same cluster. And depending upon your need, you can go and use a cluster that is hard drive based with the 4412, 4417, or as I mentioned earlier, you can also go with all flash because the software runs on both platforms the same way. You can also combine these two in terms of primary and secondary in the same cluster depending upon your use case, But when you're looking at data protection, it's not only good enough to look at a local recovery. Many organizations need to look at remote recovery, whether that be replicating to another OneSafe cluster offsite, or whether that be looking at even replicating to AWS or S3 as just a storage target. And then if we really want to have the full recovery solution where you don't have compute in your offsite location, you can actually do that with StorageCraft's cloud and the orchestrated one-click DR as a service opportunities. A couple other questions have come in. There's a question about the integrated, is this a hybrid flash, and can you do hybrid flash and spinning? Not in the same OneSafe solution. So each OneSafe is either hard drive based or all flash. And today, similarly, the cluster is either hard drive based or all flash. We don't support a mix of all flash nodes and capacity based nodes in the same cluster. That is on the roadmap, but that is not something that we do support today. There's another question here around using tape libraries. And so if they're using additional tape library, what's the best way to transition from using tape as a backup? So what we, regarding that, one of the things that we see is beginning backup policies to add storage as another target. So adding OneSafe as a target for your tape library, and then setting up, depending upon doing that initial backup locally, having a second OneSafe cluster to do that initial seeding and that replication on a LAN, and depending upon your network topology and the location, maybe you have a dedicated LAN or extended LAN to replicate that cluster, but you can move that cluster after seeding it to the offsite location. And then from there, you can begin to do the backups locally, and then have OneSafe actually replicate to an offsite location. And that's a great transition, Felix, for the question here about really how do you provide comprehensive data protection. And because we're object-based, if you look at this example in San Francisco, this is a 5210 all-flash cluster replicating to New York. That's actually a 4400 series, capacity-based. We actually only replicate the deduplicated and compressed objects. So it's very bandwidth efficient, but you also don't have to have them identically configured. So as you look at replacing tape, you can look at an alternative that may not be as inexpensive as tape, but it is less than 2 to 3 cents per gig per month that you actually purchase and own. But in terms of your dollars per gig per month expenditure, that's something that you can look to as an alternative for tape. And certainly the longer you have it and the longer you're keeping your backups as from a retention perspective, you actually have the opportunity to drive that dollar per gig cost down just internally to justify the financial decision to move away from tape to disk. The difference is that the recovery is certainly going to be much faster. Your backups are going to be faster. You're not going to have to worry about tapes getting lost, misplaced, and you also have that investment protection about using a different architecture going forward, because with our scale-out architecture, there are no forklift upgrades. So in 3 or 5 years, when you're ready to retire the hardware that you purchased, as long as you have enough capacity in the cluster, you can simply evacuate the old hardware. Those objects are dynamically moved to the other members in the cluster, and your applications don't know that anything has changed. And that's why when you look at this diagram about really providing comprehensive data protection, there's a variety of one-to-many or many-to-many solutions you can use, but based upon the requirements in that location, you can use hard drive-based or all-flash clusters. They don't have to be the same capacity. It's just a matter of if you have enough in the primary and the secondary, you can replicate from a 5-node to a 7-node, or a single-node cluster to a 3-node cluster, or vice versa. So there's a lot of flexibility because there are no LUNs and volumes. When you set up replication, it's literally a matter of 3 mouse clicks. And that's something that gives organizations a lot of flexibility to provide different solutions and different high availability solutions that otherwise weren't possible. And this is something that a lot of organizations look to when they're thinking about comprehensive data protection on premises, but also you can see the replication into StorageCraft Cloud. So that's another opportunity to look at really how many terabytes am I going to replicate to the cloud? Is it going to be 2 terabytes or 5? Whatever the capacity is of those applications, you can do that and seamlessly recover in the cloud. Now, as you look at our data protection capabilities with OneSafe and ShadowXafe, certainly we have some significant advantages in the market. However, We also are able to work with other partners, Veritas and Veeam and Unitrends and others to provide really high-performance storage recovery. And this is where, from a cost perspective, a number of our customers are looking to all-flash for that immediate recovery need because they have applications that are that important they want to either protect. We have some customers doing all of their virtual machines backing up to all-flash. Others take a subset of those VMs that are the most important. And now with OneSafe and Virtual Boot, you can literally recover an application in about 20 milliseconds. And the difference is, and we have patents around this as well, where you're actually resuming that application, you're running it on the 5210 or 5410 all-flash cluster back to the primary application. And in the background, as the application is trying to access what was the primary storage that just failed, we're moving that information, those bits around. So we're doing things in the background that don't require you to have additional steps of recovering in the background and doing storage remotion. We take care of it ourselves. Now, having said that, if you're using something like a Veeam Instant Recovery and using OneSafe as a backup target for that, which is perfectly fine, we have lots and lots of customers doing that. You can also recover dozens of virtual machines with the Instant Recovery in less than 2 minutes. And you're trying to log into the Windows machines as quickly as you can. And there's a different recovery process for that. And there's some Veeam has done a good job with making sure that instant recovery is beneficial. And whether you're using a third-party data protection solution, you can use OneSafe as a backup target. But obviously, with our OneSafe announcement of Converged data protection, there are a number of benefits for looking to a Converged solution. And that's really where they take a look at how things are managed and how we've been reimagining the storage side of things. OneSystem is what we've had for cloud-based management from the beginning of Exablocks and from the storage perspective. And so now what we've done is we've given organizations that ability to now manage all their storage through one place. You can log into onesystem.exablocks.com if you're managing storage. If you're looking at the data protection side, you see a new UI, a new look and feel, and I'll show this to you in just a few minutes here. But this is something that allows StorageCraft to proactively monitor the storage health and alerts within your organization. We know the status of every OneSafe deployment or OneBlocks historically deployment throughout the world, but that allows also our support organization to provide very rapid resolution to problems because of our visibility into that environment, but also the remote access to do that. But one of the things that's really important for all the admins on the call today is that it's extremely simple yet powerful storage management and data protection. Most of the things that you see and are able to do are 2 to 3 mouse clicks, whether that be setting up replication, whether that be assigning a data protection policy to 50 VMs or 100 VMs. All that is done through point and click. There is no command line that you need to know in terms of going to training for a couple of weeks to figure out how to manage storage and how to set up LUNs and how to fill up your snapshot volume and make sure it doesn't overflow and run out of capacity, and you start losing the recovery points that you wanted before. Well, I take that back. There are command line operations with OneSafe. If you lose network connectivity, you can get into the lights out management and set that network connectivity, get back to communicating with OneSystem. But that's about all you need to do is just to set the network through a command line as kind of a last line of defense. So having said that, one of the things I wanted to show here is the ability and the difference for HyperRestore. This is the virtual boot capability I mentioned earlier. This is something that is almost too good to be true. And fortunately, it is true, where you can recover a virtual machine in literally less than a second. We've done measurements in QA, and customers have as well, where it looks like it's about 20 milliseconds, where if you begin to recover that VM, you flip back to vCenter and you refresh the environment, it's faster than VMware can populate that from a dashboard perspective, right? The difference is that we also have the ability to recover from the cloud back to on-premises. So that failover scenario I was describing in terms of recovering in our cloud, it also is a way to recover and fail back to your data center. This is also something that's very unique in terms of looking at what you can do to think about business continuity differently. This is something that we certainly do from either a local target or cloud storage. So with that, let me flip over here to OneSystem, and I'm going to share my screen with everybody here. Everybody should be able to see the dashboard now. This is actually the dashboard where you can be able to see from a high level what the overall health of your data protection environment is, how much capacity is actually being used, how much is free, looking at some of the performance metrics for the last data protection throughput, different activities, and then your OneXafe clusters. Here I've got alerts and alarms about something's going on with this cluster, so I can delve into this and take a further look, looking at different data reduction ratios. And in this environment, I have 2 different clusters. So I want to show a couple things in terms of certainly the kind of the clean look and feel of the dashboard, where with you are able to log in, get an environment, understand what the situation is, and then if you need to take action, you can drill down and do that. But what we've done is we've tried to present the most critical information to you as an admin, so you can log in, see how things are going, and if nothing's happening, log out and you're done. If you do want to define policies, this is something that's very easy and simplified to do. So here you can see I've got a 4312 cluster. This is our prior generation and still available certainly of the OneBlox 4212 7-node cluster with encryption. And I actually have a policy here that is backing up to a OneSafe cluster, and this is my policy, right? So I'm able to see that I have a policy set of a single recovery point for 1 day. I've got 1 daily recovery, 1 weekly, and 1 monthly. And this, I'm not replicating this anywhere. So I'm not going to mess with that policy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new policy. So this is going to be, I'm going to call it Sean Custom here. And I can take snapshots every hour, 15 minutes, etc. So this is all part of our VMware integration. But I have 2 different targets here. You can very easily see how much I have free versus total. This looks to be like perhaps an all-flash 5210 model. So I'm going to go and select that. And now I'm just going to take, how many recovery points do I want? I'm going to do 21 dailies. Let's adjust that to 8 weeklies and 12 monthlies. And I'm just going to keep it local here for the local OneSafe. So now I've got this policy assigned. So now I can take a look and seeing which VMs I want to protect. So now I can decide based upon my environment. You can see different virtual servers over here. You can also filter by different machines. If you want to apply for, depending on your naming policy, I'm going to take all the R6U VMs. And now here, I have all the R6U VMs. I can select all of them if I want to, and I can assign a policy, right? I'm actually going to take just this one here and assign a policy. So very easily, I see my custom policy that I can define. And at the same view, I have a thumbnail of, okay, this is the policy. I don't have to drill down and remember what my Sean custom policy is. I can just assign this one. I'm going to go ahead and click Save, and that's it. And now it's done. On the storage side, this is actually one of the things that from a storage management perspective, again, I have a dashboard view about what's going on with my cluster. Here I've got a critical issue. We can take a look and see what that issue is. Replacing failed drives. Looks like this is obviously my QA environment here. This is something that is, we're inducing fault failures. Here is a healthy cluster, 7 nodes. I can click on that. I can see the network topologies. You can set up multiple port groups or different network profiles. You can see and understand what's happening with each of these. At the same time, when you're creating shares for that multiple purposes, when you're using the Converged OneSafe for data protection, you don't have to create any shares. Everything is converged running on the cluster. Those microservices I described at the beginning, those data protection policies are actually protecting applications and moving that storage directly from the production SAN storage via SAN direct to the cluster directly. If you do want to create a share, and let's create just a, I'm just going to call it file share, and I'm going to choose this cluster here, my 7-node encrypted at SMB, and it's going to be available for anyone. Now, if you're registered with Active Directory, which we do, you can choose that as well. And let's choose a custom policy. So now here's my custom policy of my snapshots. I'm going to keep snapshots, well, let's do 6 months instead of a year. I'm going to disable compression because this file serving, let's assume it's all video. It doesn't matter for compression. And now I can save that. Now I'm done saving this, and I can actually open this up and I can look, and now you can actually do other things in terms of replicate that to another cluster if necessary. I don't know if that other cluster is going to show up, but this is how you actually can do replication from one share to another in 3 mouse clicks. So those that have to figure out, they're used to the traditional way of RAID, LUNs, and volumes of, do I have this source and a target configured identically? You don't have to worry about that anymore, because now I actually am replicating from this 4212 cluster to this one, a 5000 series. I click next. Because I'm on my same network, I don't have to worry about external IP addresses or external ports. All the data is encrypted in flight, and as you saw earlier, this 7-node cluster is actually encrypted at rest as well. Now I click finish, and I'm done. And that's all there is to it. And so now with this dashboard view for the shares, I can see that the action is actually replicating. It's syncing. My recovery point has not yet been established, but I'll be able to very easily see each share is read-only in one or multiple clusters, and that's the target. And if I fail over, that failover point will be from the last recovery point, right? And that happens actually just in a matter of seconds to be able to do that. So that's really as easy as it is to set up a policy, create a share, define that policy that policy that you defined, actually assign that to a set of VMs. And that can be one VM or any number of VMs in a few clicks. Similarly, if you look at the capacity planning exercise, this is one of the things that you can begin to see over time. How is my storage being used? And what's that capacity trending looking like for when am I going to run out of storage? We actually do back-end analytics for this so that you can plan ahead. And as you see this approaching, the way that you add storage to a OneXafe cluster is literally 2 mouse clicks. You install the initial cluster, obviously, by just network power drives turn on, confirm the cluster configuration. But it's even as easy to add to a 3-node cluster going to a 4 or 5-node cluster, power on the new ones. They're connected to the same network. They'll automatically discover the other ones. And you confirm both 2 mouse clicks. Yes, I want these 2 new nodes to join an existing 3-node cluster. And now you have a 5-node cluster. The pool of storage increases. All the applications see more data. You have more capacity available for backup literally in about 5 to 10 minutes. It's that easy to do. So I'm going to flip back to the presentation here, which everybody should be able to see again. If there are any issues seeing the slides, just enter that into the chat window. The next area I wanted to focus on briefly is around the primary storage. So we've been talking about OneXafe as a converged data protection solution, looking at how we can protect applications. But now, as a primary storage, we have the opportunity to do 2 things. Number one, be the primary storage for your virtual environment. And this is something that both models, because the same software runs on the hardware and all flash models, we're VMware ready. So you can actually use and think about VMware storage differently. You don't have to worry about how many multi-terabyte or 1, 2, or 3 terabyte LUNs you're going to create, map to the data store, and then figure out how many VMDKs you're going to map to those and go through a thin provisioning exercise and all those tedious activities. With OneXafe, you have a couple of NFS exports. In this case, I just have a single one, and we don't have a file size limitation, nor do we have an export size limitation. So you can maximize VMware support of 64 terabytes per data store and have any number of VMs actually accessing that. You can have a couple of NFS exports for availability and failover, depending on how many hosts. But as you grow over time, what I described before around data protection and applications, just seeing more storage, the same is true with VMware. There's no need for thin provisioning. When you grow from 10 terabytes to 100 terabytes, VMware sees that in a matter of seconds. All the applications, those VMDKs that are mapped to the data store, they just see more storage capacity. It's something that's very easy and very simple to do. But also from a storage management perspective, from the unstructured side of things, we have the ability to protect applications with our continuous snapshots. So the same software that I described before in terms of inline deduplication and compression, on a per share basis, you can define what type of storage policy I want to assign to that. So for my virtual machines you saw before, you may have seen it in the share creation, where you can have a virtual machine storage policy that has deduplication and compression turned off, but snapshots turned off, right? You can have a backup recovery storage policy if it's going to be a Veeam backup target where you have compression on, variable length deduplication enabled, as well as snapshots just for those VBKs to be protected for accidental deletion or ransomware infection protection for a week. And that can file serving, I can have another policy that says, hey, I want to keep it for 3 years. Or if you're a medical institution looking at PACS storage, right? I want to keep those snapshots forever or 7 years. You can define that as you'd like to. But as you grow over time, there continues to be no forklift upgrades. But because of our snapshot capabilities, you're actually able to take very granular recovery points, and this is no action necessary from an administration perspective of setting up snapshots. They just happen all the time, every 90 seconds. The only question for you as an admin is, how long would you like to retain those snapshots? And so particularly a lot of our customers use this Converged capability for file serving in a cluster, but also as a backup target, because all those VMs that are running Windows servers that you're doing file serving out of VMs, move those off and just store those directly on a OneXafe cluster. Do all the file serving off of the cluster. Free up the virtual machines and the host resources in your virtual environment, free up that SAN storage, and we enable and integrate with Active Directory. So you have all the same permissions in terms of file and folder permission settings, but we also have the immutable snapshots. Those immutable snapshots protect your data from ransomware. It allows you as an admin to go back to any file or folder and pull back an encrypted file, right? You can also enable your users, if they delete or modify a file, to just recover them themselves. Right mouse Windows previous version, they can do that, or they can submit a ticket. So this is something that ransomware cannot disable, modify, or delete any of our snapshots because of the immutability we have of our object store, right? There are lots of stories around ransomware actually disabling DSS without the Windows admins knowing about it. And there are some best practices around ways to try to prevent that, but it's not foolproof, right? Snapshots can be deleted in other solutions. They cannot be deleted with us, right? Even admins can't delete snapshots. So this is something that when you're thinking about really the different use cases and different capabilities for the Converged storage, this is something that, excuse me, this is something that gives organizations a lot of flexibility. This is something, as you think about data protection and primary storage, OneXafe is really a flexible solution that allows a number of different deployment options, but it's also an investment protection, right? So you can start today with one particular use case and grow over time. And that same OneXafe solution that you purchase today, if you're not using it for primary storage for VMs, you can at a later point in time. If you're not using it for data protection services and just using it for file storage and primary storage of unstructured data, you can add and subscribe to that capability at any point in time. So there are a number of things that this is very flexible for. So I'm going to take a few more questions that have come in here. One of the questions here is, what's the minimum that you need to start with? Most clustering companies start with 3. Yeah, good question. So this is actually, with OneXafe, you can begin with a single node. And that single node could be any model, it doesn't matter. We recommend typically to fully populate that node just from a performance perspective, but you could start with a single node and half populate 6 drives is typically what we recommend for kind of a minimum level of performance. But you can start with a single node and grow from there. Add a second node, a third node, up to 7 nodes today. That to that 1.4 petabyte number that I mentioned with the 4417. For those that are on the call that may have larger requirements for that, but that number of 7 will be increasing to 15 and 21 nodes in a cluster here in the near future, and that will all be enabled just through a software update. Another question here about what's included with the maintenance OneSystem. Oh, so good question. OneSystem is our cloud-based management service, and whether you are using that in OneSystem.exabox.com that StorageCraft is hosting, or whether you deploy that on your own premises in a VM, that is how you manage all of your storage. That's how you do your software updates, as well as all the service and support. And so when you subscribe to OneSystem on an annual or multi-year basis, that enables all those capabilities: management, software updates, as well as service support. And so to upgrade and enable the software for OneSafe, it's literally a push button in OneSystem. When you navigate to that node, you'll see that there's a software update available. You literally just click the button, and in a handful of minutes, that software updates the OneXafe, and you're off and running. So the new capabilities or additional features I was mentioning in terms of like larger cluster node support, moving beyond 7, those are all things that are just going to be a software update for those that have active subscription. And active subscription is necessary to use the storage, but it's something that's very straightforward to use.